And at 10, Hammerhead. Growing up, his father would berate him for speaking Italian in their Russian household and would beat the boy with a hammer when punishing him. So, you know, Father of the Year right there. I guess that's kind of how he got the name. In school, he would later lie and say that he was Italian, only for a bully named Rico to reveal his lie and then steal the hat he wore, showing the ugly scars on his head from frequent hammer blows. Rico and his girlfriend would be the kills that Hammerhead needed to join the mob though. Hammerhead convinced the mob that he was Italian, which was necessary since they didn't really accept inferior stock, as they would call it, and he eventually killed his father with a much bigger hammer than his father ever used on him. Poetic justice. When his head was shattered in a brawl though, Jonas Haro discovered him in an alley and operated on him, replacing his broken skull with one made of steel, whereas some versions make this an adamantium head instead. He would later go on to get a full body robotic upgrade from Mr. Negative after being shot in the back of the head with a special bullet, which would have killed him. This is definitely some alpha energy.
Coming in at number 9, we have Crossbones. A genetically enhanced mercenary with a hazy past, Crossbones wandered the world as an independent gun for hire until finally catching the attention of the villainous Red Skull. With proficiency in most forms of weapon known to man and a particular liking for stiletto blade enhanced gauntlets, Crossbones doesn't really have an ulterior motive or dreams of world domination, but rather will do whatever grisly task a supervillain is willing to pay him for, such as the time at the end of Civil War where he took advantage of the chaos and seemingly assassinated Captain America. Whatever the nasty job, Crossbones is willing to do it, and that's what makes him such a dangerous villain.
And at 8, Silvermane. As a teacher, Silvio Manfredi joined a criminal organization known as the Magia. With his cunning and superior fighting skills, Manfredi rose to the top of the Magia's ranks. He later became the head of a family, which in mob terms just meant a group of loyal members, not actually like related or anything. By creating gang wars, he increased the power of the Manfredi family, and in the process he also increased the power of the Magia as a whole, which pleased his superiors, obviously, because more power, it's more power. Manfredi also married a woman named Catherine and fathered a son, but when he was middle-aged, his hair became white, which led to the nickname that he grew to accept, Silvermane. Crime fighters Cloak and Dagger decided to take down Silvermane because of his role in illegal drug trafficking in New York City. Dagger attacked Silvermane and nearly killed him using her powers. However, doctors saved Silvermane's life by transporting his brain, most of his head, and other vital organs into a robotic body that would then provide him with superhuman strength, which is nuts and exactly why we shouldn't try and put our brains in robots. I've been saying this since this list. Don't do it.
Number 7, joined Hydra. Kingpin ended up joining up with Hydra later on, even becoming one of its leaders. Or at least, so he thought. When it was revealed that higher up the chain, the Red Skull was also involved, Kingpin decided to break ties. Evil as he was, even he didn't want to be allied with the Red Skull. However, he still, for a time, was the one seemingly controlling Hydra behind the scenes, with Supreme Hydra, who unknowingly was actually his son, Richard, reporting to him. In fact, Richard had actually infiltrated Hydra while his father was in a permanent state of shock, almost comatose, and had set up everything for his dad to simply come along and take control. Too bad Red Skull was involved though. Kingpin's plan at the time was to overthrow the United States government, and he and Hydra, up until the Red Skull reveal, actually made for a pretty powerful alliance.
And at 6, Tombstone. Lonnie Lincoln was born and raised in Harlem, New York. He had a congenital disorder characterized by the complete absence of pigment in his skin, which made him an outcast among the children his age. He also had a problem with his vocal cords, making him speak in whispers. The only student who didn't ostracize Lincoln was aspiring reporter Joe Robinson, causing Lonnie to misconstrue this lack of hostility as a token of friendship. 8 years after their senior year, Tombstone had grown to become a mob enforcer in Philadelphia, where Robertson happened to work as a reporter. When Lincoln tried to kill crime boss Saulsy Montana, his employee witnessed the murder and contacted the newspaper where Robbie worked. Robbie was about to meet with Hipper when Tombstone killed him and arrived at their point of meeting, only to find Tombstone taunting him with the man's corpse. Tombstone let Robbie go though, just because they used to be friends, but later taunted him on the phone, prompting Robbie to flee with his wife back to New York, where he became an acclaimed reporter for the Daily Bugle. This dude is freaking messed up, and if you've seen him in like the 90s Spider-Man cartoon, That version's even freakier.
At number 5 is Bane. One of the toughest upbringings on this list, the New 52 Bane spends his childhood in prison, living out his own father's sentence in a setting that teaches him how to fight to stay alive. But beyond his original motivations, Bane has one of the highest strength levels on this whole list. Known to be able to lift 15 tons, Bane doesn't hesitate to make use of his industrial surroundings while taking on his opposition, often using concrete slabs and boulders as weapons and projectiles in battle. What's more though, Bane is often caught in the grips of a venom addiction, which empowers him even more when he's under the influence. This gives him that extra power boost that brings his strength to another tier that is often unattainable by most villainous standards, especially among fellow street level bad guys, because with Bane, it's not uncommon to see him crashing through a stone wall or shattering concrete floors or one-shotting other villains like Poison Ivy and Man-Bat in his fits of rage.
And at 4, Kingpin. A crime boss is one thing. A crime boss that to the public is a well-respected philanthropist and businessman is something else. But this businessman is like 300 pounds of muscle. Wilson Fisk is an absolute madman who runs most of New York's and Las Vegas's criminal underworld. However, things get even more intense after his wife is killed, so he doesn't end up retiring, which he was actually going to do, but you know, then they killed his wife. After the murder of his wife, not only did he resume leadership of his former organization, but he also turned over his files on other criminal leaders to the law through the costumed crime fighter of Daredevil. Kingpin actually helped Daredevil, except now this time he had the motive of ridding himself of any and all rivals. The ploy actually worked though, and as a result of the evidence in the files, many crime leaders both inside and outside the Magia were convicted. In the ensuing power vacuum, the Kingpin rebuilt his coalition stronger than ever before. He moved on to control a great majority of non-Magia East Coast gangs dealing in conventional crimes, and the Kingpin's organization became stronger than any single Magia family in the New York area.
Number 3, brutally kills Anatoly Renskahov. In the Daredevil Netflix series, Anatoly Renskahov is a leader of the Russian Mafia in New York. When he fails the Kingpin, unable to get the true name of Daredevil from night nurse Claire Temple, Kingpin decides he wants to have a word with Anatoly. Renskahov comes forward himself, actually wishing to speak with Kingpin and kind of clear the air. But this is not the type of word Kingpin had in mind. Instead, Fisk begins to attack Renskahov, and despite Renskahov's own toughness, the man survived life in Russian prison after all, Fisk kills him using a car door to crush his head. The crazy part is throughout the scene we learn it is not Renskahov's failure that has actually ignited Fisk's rage here, but the fact that he embarrassed Wilson in front of Vanessa while the two were on a date. This just goes to show how dangerous it is to upset Kingpin, as he has generally been shown as having a very violent streak and a sometimes off-the-wall temper. To relive this moment, you can return to the shocking end of episode 4 of season 1. The Daredevil series, at least in Canada by the way, is still on Netflix and available to stream. I was watching it earlier. It's great.
Penultimately, into number 2, The Hood. After seeing Electro fight Daredevil as a child, the life of a supervillain really enticed Parker Robbins. With a mother in need of constant medical care, he soon dropped out of high school to steal money to give her better care. His cousin John told him about some valuable material perfect to steal at a nearby warehouse, and together, they broke into it. They were about to leave when they were attacked by a demon in a cloak. Peter shot the being and assumed that he had killed it, but not wanting to leave empty-handed, he took the cloak and the boots. For some reason, I don't know why you thought you were gonna get any money for it, but whatever. On the way home, he was jumped for his shoes and used the boots to escape. And upon finding out that the boots actually gave him the ability to walk on air, he took the cloak over to John's apartment where he found out that the cloak gave him powers as well, originating from the demon Dormammu, though he didn't know it at the time. A dude with a cloak and boots giving him a fraction of the powers of Dormammu? Yeah, that's a number 2 for me. Pun intended now.
And coming in at our top spot, we've got to go with the classic Daredevil villain, Bullseye. An incredibly skilled assassin with nearly perfect accuracy, Bullseye ranks as one of the greatest villains that heroes like Spider-Man and Daredevil have ever had to face. Bullseye was responsible for the death of Elektra and appears to have zero regard for life or any sense of moral goodness, with with even other members of the Dark Avengers being disgusted at his lust for murder when he was briefly a member of their team. While Bullseye often finds himself under the employ of characters such as the Kingpin or Norman Osborn, his rather unique powers and his complete lack of empathy make him potentially the most deadly street-level villain of all.
At number 10 is Bullseye. Longtime villain to Daredevil, Bullseye has become one of the most powerful and unbeatable villains to be considered a street-level threat. His marksmanship gives him that extra fear factor since he prides himself on never missing, so whatever he's firing at you, you'd better hope it's not deadly because it's probably making contact one way or another. Bullseye is also credited, if that's the right word, with killing Elektra in the comics, leading to her very real and lengthy absence, that is until she returns as Daredevil. He's also killed Daredevil's lifelong lover, Karen Page, and the Daredevil himself at one point during the End of Days storyline. This is also a pretty shocking moment, especially given the method by which Bullseye does it. A stab right to the head isn't the way you expect a mainstream Marvel hero to go down, and at the hands of a street-level bad guy too. At number 9 we have Harley Quinn. Harley is a relatively new comic book villain, all things considered, but in her short time since her first appearance in Batman the Animated Series, she has made a huge splash. Originally the evil sidekick to the Joker, she has since branched off and made a name for herself as a pretty impressive street-level villain. She's very cunning, but also shows some very impressive power at times, like when she beats down Nightwing, or even the time she takes out Wonder Woman single-handedly. At least for a time, and she does it with sleeping gas, but still, she takes her down. All in all, Harley Quinn has become such a popular and prevalent villain that her street-level status has even been contested a few times. My guess is she will soon be given a huge power adjustment for the better and find her way to becoming a higher level villain than even the Joker himself. At number 8 we have the classic Green Goblin. This villain has always been one of Spider-Man's biggest nemesis, but still has always kept his integrity as a grassroots street level villain. Although Norman Osborn has become involved in plenty of bigger plots and missions that concern greater causes than street violence, his persona in Goblin mode is still very much a street level threat. And with his arsenal of goblin bombs and sleeping gas, he often packs a pretty significant punch at every encounter. But the worst of the Green Goblin's plots typically aim to inflict psychological torture on Peter Parker, which shows Osborn's resourcefulness, because street level villains only have so much to work with. In fact, I'd argue that Green Goblin is one of the most psychologically damaging villains on this whole list, often targeting family members and deep traumas that force Spider-Man and other targets of his into extremely uncomfortable positions and tough decisions.
Coming in at number 7, we have Boomerang. Originally hailing from Australia and given his identity as a stereotypical joke by an offshoot of Hydra, Boomerang has no actual superhuman abilities, just an incredibly gifted throwing arm that has been utilized over the years to throw more and more intricate, high-tech boomerangs. Best known as a thorn in Spider-Man's side and one of the founding members of the superior foes of Spider-Man, Boomerang would eventually begin to have a change of heart after becoming Peter Parker's roommate and getting a bit too over his head with his relationship to the Kingpin. Nevertheless, Boomerang's incredible accuracy and the quality of his high-tech gadgets means that he's not a villain to underestimate.
At number 6 is Kraven the Hunter. As one of Spider-Man's oldest and most enduring villains, Kraven has had plenty of time to build up his resume as one of the most impressive street-level villains in comic book history. And I'd argue that Kraven is one of the most authentically street-level villains on the list, considering he devotes his life to tracking down and hunting superheroes with little more than some traps and handheld weaponry. But his biggest move of all is when he actually catches and kills Spider-Man during the events of Kraven's last hunt. Although the death only lasts so long, it does show that Kraven is actually capable of following through with even the most ambitious hunts on his list. And what's more, his manipulation abilities also shine through when he successfully dupes the masses into believing that he is the web slinger himself for a time, dashing Spider-Man's reputation and making his comeback that much more difficult.
Number 5. First kill. As tragic as Wilson Fisk's origins are, the fact remains that he committed his first murder at a young age. In the 1998 Daredevil series, considered Volume 2 overall, in issue number 15, we get a look back on what Wilson Fisk's childhood was like. His parents struggle to make ends meet and are constantly arguing about the finances. Bills unpaid means that things are constantly turning off in the Fisk household. One such thing they end up losing is the heat, which results in Wilson's pet rat, Benjamin Franklin, freezing to death. At least, I think that's a rat. I wasn't sure if it was a rat or a mouse when I was looking at the comic, but I'm pretty sure it's a rat because of the tail. I'm no animal expert though, or rodent expert for that matter. Fisk becomes obsessed with money, and at one point is paid $15 to start a fire. When a maintenance man gets in the way of his plan, he becomes Wilson's first kill. That is how obsessive young Wilson has become at this point, and continues to be pretty much throughout his life. Pretty obsessive guy.
At number 4 is Dr. Octopus. Still considered a street-level bad guy, Doc Ock seems to be one of the most inventive and high-powered villains in that category. With his supercharged intellect, he is known to be on par with Tony Stark and even Reed Richards, and often applies his smarts to developing new technologies to help him succeed as a villain. Known as the founder of the Sinister Six, he's also got ties to the rest of the supervillain community and clearly has the ability to mobilize his villainous counterparts as though it's a second nature to him. But above all, his greatest feat that sort of puts the definition of street level into question is the time when he swaps Peter Parker's mind with his own while he's facing a terminal illness. This leads Doc Ock into a life of heroism as Spider-Man and ultimately kills the one and only Peter Parker in the process. That moment is almost on par with the time he held the whole world hostage as one of the most impressive feats that any street level villain has ever accomplished.
Coming in at number 3, we have Barracuda, the arch nemesis of the Punisher. An optimistic and smiling serial killer and gangster, the Barracuda is everything the Punisher stands against and more. Originally just hired by a larger criminal organization to assassinate Frank Castle, the Barracuda's rivalry with the Punisher became personal when their ensuing battle caused the Barracuda to lose both an eye and all the fingers on his right hand. The Barracuda might not have any superpowers himself, but his depravity and lust for violence are essentially unmatched, with multiple moments over the years that rank as some of Marvel's edgiest, such as snorting drugs off of a fresh human skull and engaging in literal cannibalism.
At number 2 is Kingpin. As one of the most well-connected villains on the list, Kingpin uses the streets to his advantage more than maybe any other villain on this list. Being a big brute with powerful strength and durability stats, he's pretty good on his own, but his real power comes from his social power and influence. He's got the ability to take down his enemies with a systematic approach the same way that a mob boss would in the real world. Except in this case, his cronies are often other superpowered beings who are willing to carry out his evil deeds for him. And if we're not counting social power as part of a villain's power set on a list about power, then we're not truly valuing every angle of the art of villainy, if you will. And although someone like Dr. Doom might have the monopoly on the cosmic level villain community, this is, after all, a list about the street level bad guys and how they make use of the limited resources they have access to on the streets of New York or Gotham. And there's just no arguing that Kingpin just simply has the streets under his thumb. Okay, at number 1 is the one and only, the man himself, Joker. I feel like I really shouldn't have to justify this entry because we all know that the Joker is one of the best villains, not just on the streets of Gotham, but of all time. And it's primarily due to this resourcefulness I mentioned in the previous entry that being a street level villain demands. The Joker is well aware that he has always needed to make more of an impact than Batman's superpowered villains, but without the superpowers. And the way that he typically does this is by resorting to psychological torment against his enemies, usually by bringing their family members and friends into the fold or by appealing to their greatest insecurities. And all in the name of a laugh, which just adds that extra level of intimidation to the whole effort. It's the Joker who paralyzes Commissioner Jim Gordon's daughter and takes all morale away from the good guys at that crucial moment. It's the Joker who beats Batman's second Robin, Jason Todd, to death, leaving Batman to find a new sidekick. And it's the Joker who tricks Superman into dropping a bomb on Metropolis and killing the love of his life, Lois Lane. He's never acting alone, but instead of enlisting other villains to help in his plots, he's often enlisting the heroes themselves, turning their own psyches on them. if not making their whole lives crumble around them before the battle can even start. There's no need to expound anymore because I can just go on, but when I knew I would be writing this list, there was no question that the Joker was gonna be in the #1 spot.
Number 10 created his own crime business monopoly. In issue number 50 of The Amazing Spider-Man, which also coincidentally happens to be Kingpin's first appearance ever, Peter Parker decides to call it quits on being Spider-Man. As soon as Kingpin hears tell of this, he decides to take this opportunity to put his master plan into action. He's been aiming to make the world of crime a business since day one, and now is his golden opportunity. He gets together all the major players and they all almost unanimously agree to Kingpin taking charge of a new, fully organized and cohesive criminal empire. Well, except for the big man, who actually tries to return to the world of crime after leaving it and take charge of this new organization that Fisk basically just built. Doesn't go so great for him, as you can imagine. Unfortunately, before the end of the issue, Spider-Man has already returned, so this attempt was kinda short-lived, but it wouldn't stop Kingpin from trying to create a vast and efficient criminal empire in the future, all under his own leadership, of course. And at least it lasted for a few issues there. That attempt. Number 9 attempted to silence the press. After bringing together his crime monopoly, Kingpin began a massive crime spree, which got the notice of the press. The Daily Bugle started to talk about who could be behind everything that was going on, and decided to cover it, because well, it was news. Kingpin, however, didn't like that they were alerting the public to what was going on, or having anyone poke their nose into his affairs. He kidnapped J. Jonah Jameson in response, and threatened him to stop reporting on the increase in crime, or else. Jameson refused to abide, stating he would not be pressured into having someone tell him what he could or couldn't print in his paper. And fortunately, Spider-Man did end up arriving, and while initially getting beaten, would later save the day. Although that's not quite how Jameson, of course, would remember it. He's like, Spider-Man threatened me. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are enjoying this list and you want more lists on Kingpin, because Kingpin is awesome and he deserves to be hyped, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 8 betrayed Don Rigoletto. The original Rigoletto. There is actually another Don Rigoletto who succeeded the original. He too, however, was taken out by Kingpin. Wilson Fisk used to be the bodyguard, enforcer, and kind of general right-hand man to Don Rigoletto initially in the comics. However, getting in good with Don was all part of Wilson's elaborate plot to take control of the city. He had been building connections for years, waiting for this moment when he would take out his boss and replace him. Fisk killed Rigoletto in a moment of vulnerability, near the end of issue number 3 of Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. After a meeting, Don was complaining about the request that he'd had to move into more ludicrous areas of crime. At least, areas of crime he considered to be ludicrous. I think most of us would, actually. Fisk seems to respond by giving Don a temple massage to help ease his boss's stress. However, this doesn't last, as while Don is soothed momentarily and at peace, Fisk then decides to snap his neck. The moment also goes to show just how much Don trusted Wilson. Granted, Don Rigoletto was still a crime boss, but Wilson in a lot of ways was probably a worse replacement when it came to how much power he has managed to amass and how dangerously he wields that power.
At number 7 is Red Hood. After the events of Death in the Family, Red Hood sees his origin story come to a brutal fruition as he is forced to rebuild himself. And as he rebuilds, he solidifies a name for himself as one of the most powerful street-level villains out there. He travels the world, becoming adept in all the martial art forms like Aikido, ninjutsu, Krav Maga, and even capoeira, among others. His hand-to-hand combat skills lead him to defeating Ra's al Ghul in a fistfight at one point, which is a pretty impressive feat considering the villain is typically a tough match for even Batman himself. Another impressive angle for Red Hood is that he knows how heroes move and act, since he used to be one himself, and this allows him to be one step ahead of them at all times. All while keeping street-level status, he even goes back to heroism in his own twisted way when he steals the Batman mantle during Bruce Wayne's presumed death. But ultimately, his villainy seems to prevail at times, like when he kills over 80 men in a poisoning plot while escaping Arkham Asylum. His devilish, revenge-driven plots are always pushing the envelope, and his mysterious persona keeps him hidden in the shadows as he runs the Gotham Underground as a solo act.
Number 6 put Aunt May in the ICU. While this one wasn't intentional, Kingpin did end up being the one responsible for almost killing Aunt May. Notably though, Aunt May seems to have some kind of like immortality powers, at least when it comes to plots and scripts, as she didn't die here, nor has she ever really properly died anytime her life has been threatened or seemingly even snuffed out. Spider-Man had actually been Kingpin's target. This was after Spider-Man had revealed his true identity of Peter Parker to the world. This put a target on Peter's back, obviously, with Kingpin putting a hit on Spider-Man. However, the shooter who was aiming for Peter missed, and instead hit his Aunt May, who was with Peter at the time. Aunt May ended up on death's doorstep and very nearly died here. Meanwhile, Peter donned his black suit and searched for the one responsible. When he found out it was Fisk, he went to pay Kingpin a visit in prison in issue 542 of Amazing Spider-Man. Oh yeah, Kingpin did all of this from a prison cell, by the way. Peter beat him to within an inch of his life as a warning and declared that if May didn't make it, he would be back to finish the job. It was such an evil thing that it even made Spider-Man momentarily pretty evil.
Coming in at number 5, we have Typhoid Mary. A very powerful mutant with multiple personality disorder, Mary is capable of telekinesis, telepathy, and manipulating fire when under the influence of her more violent Typhoid and Bloody Mary personas. Her transformations between personalities are so intense that even Daredevil was not able to tell after encountering two personalities that they were the same person, despite his increased senses supposedly being immune to her trickery. Despite being a mutant, Mary has most often fought with both Daredevil and Spider-Man, giving these street-level heroes a headache as they try to deal with multiple violent women in one deadly body.
Number 4. Killed Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse was the nickname given to Maya Lopez's aka Echo's father. His real name was Willie Lincoln, and he ended up dying because of his connection to Kingpin. Initially, Wilson and Willie were best friends, thick as thieves, and Fisk appreciated Willie's off-the-wall nature. Wilson himself was a bit crazy when it came to his behavior at the time, and having Crazy Horse around helped him to feel, I guess, a little bit more sane by comparison. That is until Crazy Horse got a little too wild even for Wilson. Kingpin ordered Lincoln killed and then raised Maya as his ward. He sent her to all the best schools, seeing potential in her. You can imagine Maya's reaction when years later she realized that Wilson was the one responsible for taking her father from her. She attempted to kill Wilson, shooting him point blank in the head. Fisk would actually surprisingly survive this, though he would be left blind for a time as a result of that attack. I still can't believe that he survived it. Like, that's crazy.
Okay, at number 3 we have Jean-Paul Valley. Typically going by the name of Azrael, Jean-Paul Valley has a pretty powerful track record and seems to almost supersede the title of street level villain, but I would argue that he still is in that category and simply exists to show just how powerful a street level villain could get. Having been given a massive genetic enhancement at birth, Jean-Paul already has a 1-up on most of the other entries on this list, with a superhuman set of abilities like enhanced healing, senses, durability, speed, and of course, strength. But above all, he's got a reputation as one of the most intelligent villains, with an advanced hand-to-hand combat and swordsmanship stat to boot, using his flaming sword as a weapon of choice in close combat and his projectile blades at distance. He's also got a win out as one of the coolest looking street level villains too, if you ask me.
Number 2. Killed Spider-Man. Sometimes people forget the Kingpin isn't just a Daredevil villain, he's a prominent Spider-Man villain as well. In fact, his first appearance wasn't in Daredevil, it was actually in an issue of Amazing Spider-Man, issue number 50 to be exact, which we actually talked about at the beginning of this list. So it didn't come as a surprise when he showed up as the main villain in the Spider-Man animated film Into the Spider-Verse, at least for fans that know this about him, I guess. What did come as a surprise though was that he actually succeeded in killing Spider-Man aka Peter Parker in the movie. Fortunately, at the same time, Spider-Man aka Miles Morales was just discovering his own spider powers and had a multiversal team of spider folks end up joining him in order to stop Wilson Fisk's evil plot. Still, Kingpin did kill Peter Parker in cold blood and then also tried to play it like he'd always thought of Spider-Man as a great hero and was friends with the guy, even throwing a banquet in Spider-Man's honor afterward and inviting love of his life, Mary Jane Watson, to it. Wow. Number 1. Completely ruined Daredevil's life. During the Born Again story arc, Daredevil's true identity as Matt Murdock ends up being used against him. Kingpin ends up acquiring this information, which was sold by Karen Page for drugs in Mexico, but finds its way to him in New York. Kingpin then attempts to ruin Matt Murdock and thereby Daredevil's life in every conceivable way. His house ends up being firebombed, and even his uniform is left in tatters. His accounts are frozen by the IRS. Fisk even tries to ruin his reputation as a lawyer by getting a police lieutenant to swear that he saw Murdoch bribe a witness to commit an act of perjury while on the stand. Not only that, but he also threatens the life of Karen Page as well, almost killing her.
Number 10. Daredevil. First appearing in his own comic in 1964, Matt Murdock has been on the beat as long as any of them. His father was a boxer who raised Matt alone and wanted his son to be successful, pushing him to become educated and setting him on the path to becoming a lawyer. One day, a truck crash results in a radioactive isotope splashing out into his eyes, blinding him. He awoke in the hospital to find all his other senses were now amplified to a superhuman degree. Daredevil is a great street level hero, striking an awesome balance by kicking butt on the streets and in the courtroom. Narratively, it also makes for some great storytelling opportunities. We all love a little courtroom drama. Sometimes called the man without fear, Daredevil is able to detach from emotions like fear in a way that is almost sociopathic. He can detect minute changes in the temperature and air around him, and also benefits from superhuman agility, enhanced endurance, and peak human speed. There are many testaments to Daredevil's power. He has an extremely high pain tolerance and an indomitable will, making him immune to telepathy and mind control.
Next on the list we have Jean-Paul Valley, someone who wanted to be Batman but didn't really believe in the whole "I'm not gonna kill people" thing. Jean-Paul Valley was trained by the Order, a spin-off group from the Knights Templar, who has trained some of the most dangerous people in history. Jean-Paul Valley was commissioned by Batman to take the mantle of Dark Knight because Bruce Wayne's back was broken, but this guy took it a little too far and would brutalize every criminal that he found. Eventually, Batman had to come back and take him out. Since then, Jean-Paul has gone through a ton of iterations, even becoming a Black Lantern at one point. But now he has fallen into the role of hero, and anyone who has been trained by Batman is a serious force on the streets.
Number 8. Misty Knight. Nicknamed Misty, Mercedes Knight is a human cyborg hero and leader of the Defenders. Danny Rand, aka Iron Fist, is her ex-fiance. She was a police officer who lost her arm in a bombing and caught Tony Stark's attention. Tony built her a bionic arm and she quit the NYPD after being relegated to a desk job after that incident. She starts a private investigation business and works alongside Colleen Wing. They also team up with Luke Cage and Iron Fist. She was once roommates with Jean Grey and was one of the 142 registered superheroes who were a part of the Avengers Initiative. She has mad detective skills and is an expert marksman, but is most notably known for her powerful bionic arm, which is upgraded multiple times throughout her story. Her arm has been used to hack and control robots, shoot concussive blasts, produce an energy shield, and even been used as a grappling hook. Number 7. Iron Fist. Danny Rand was the son of a wealthy businessman named Wendell Rand. He seems like a normal dude who gets married and has a son named Danny, but he's actually from the city of the Immortals, Kunlun. He was driven out by his brother when the two were quarreling over a woman's love, but later in life he seeks to return. When he does return, his son Danny comes along with him, and after his father dies, Danny is trained by Lei Kung, the Thunderer. After years of intense martial arts training, Danny earns the chance to gain the power of the Iron Fist. He battles to prove himself, fighting against a giant fire-breathing serpent guarding a brazier containing its heart. And upon his victory, he picks up the heart and is imbued with the quasi-mystical force known as the Iron Fist. He returns to America to take vengeance for his father's death, and has been pounding the pavement ever since. He is already a highly trained and extremely powerful warrior, but by harnessing and summoning the spiritual energy or Chi, he reaches superhuman levels of power. Not only does he benefit from Chi enhanced durability, reflexes, and so on, but he also has some unique powers you might not know of. He is capable of mind meld, using his power to fuse consciousness with another person. He can channel Chi energy to heal himself or others, and uses Chi enhanced senses to strike specific pressure points with pinpoint accuracy. He is exceptionally powerful, and through ongoing training and study of the Book of the Iron Fist, it's possible that he could become even stronger.
Next on the list we got Lady Shiva, a story of revenge turned to anguish, turned into a life of fighting crime. Such are the struggles of a hero. People love to get revenge on those who wronged them. Lady Shiva grew up thinking that the previous hero on this list, Richard Dragon, killed her sister. She hated his guts, and she knew that there was one way that she could quell the beast inside her that wanted revenge, and that was Getting revenge. I think you guys could have figured that one out yourself. Well, Lady Shiva, also known as Sandra Woosin, would dedicate her life to training in martial arts so she could one day be strong enough to take down the man who killed her sister. Eventually, she was one of the most deadly martial artists around and set up a trap for Richard Dragon, but things didn't go as planned. They got into a scuffle and Richard was able to reveal to her that he never killed her sister. In a way, this kind of broke her. Her whole purpose was to kill this dude, and now she had no reason to kill him. So she decided to team up with him and take on the world of crime and become a deadly crime fighter.
Number 5. Shang-Chi. Also referred to as Marvel's Bruce Lee, Shang-Chi is a master of Kung Fu. His father was an immortal sorcerer and crime lord named Fu Manchu, and he raised Shang to be a deadly assassin. He trained with various masters, learning alchemy, and even absorbed fighting techniques in his sleep through virtual reality. After his first assignment, however, he realized his father was evil and faked his own death, seeking to take down his father's criminal empire. He was a part of the Marvel Knights, and he later joined the Heroes for Hire. When Spider-Man lost his spider sense, it was Shang-Chi who helped him to train to compensate for it, creating a new fighting style called the Way of the Spider, with short-range attacks targeting nerve clusters and pressure points. Shang is a master fighter who has fought the Iron Fist to a stalemate. He is a skilled marksman, proficient with a variety of weapons, and has full control over his own nervous system. He is also an expert at finding pressure points, expert at philosophy, and a skilled fisherman, showing remarkable patience. He wields a pair of metallic nunchucks designed by Stark that can discharge repulsor blasts upon impact. Number 4. Luke Cage. Born and raised in Harlem, New York City, Luke spent his life causing trouble and eventually joining a gang. When one of his old buddies plants drugs in his home and tips off the police, he winds up sent to jail, and while in prison is consumed by hatred and rage. He spends his time getting into brawls and attempting to escape for the most part. When Dr. Noah Burstein is using inmates at the prison as test subjects, Luke is selected and immersed in an electro-biochemical system. The system gets tampered with and overloads, enhancing Luke's entire body and giving him unbreakable skin and super strength. He uses these abilities to escape from prison and return to Harlem, designing a costume and becoming a hero for hire, the title of the comic he premieres in. He is seriously powerful, eventually becoming strong enough to lift 50 tons. With a body as hard as titanium, he is also resistant to bullets, explosions, or falls from extreme height.
Next on the list we got Jason Todd. Jason Todd, also known as the Red Hood, didn't have the easiest transition into the Bat family. He was a troubled kid forced to steal just to survive, who was scooped up by Batman and brought into a life of hero work. Being the new Robin should have been the best thing that ever happened to him, right? Well, not true. He died. And it was something that the fans voted for, which is kind of messed up. But after the Jason Todd Robin was killed, we see someone show up on the scene who knows many of Batman's tricks, loves to use guns, and goes by the name the Red Hood. Who could this be? Well, it was Jason Todd coming back from the dead. Eventually, he would regain his sanity and stop trying to kill Batman, but he would keep his cool new getup. With Jason being the least skilled in acrobatics compared to the other members of the Bat family, he relies on grit and brute force to take down his enemies, and every now and again he'll pull out a gun, which is something I've always thought would work well with the utility belt.
And coming at number 2, Wolverine. One of the most tragic and conflicted badasses ever. Wolverine probably should have been on part 1 of this list. Wolverine is a Canadian mutant with an adamantium skeleton and bone claws, a nearly indestructible super soldier. Also known as Logan, he is one of the most prominent members of the X-Men, and possibly one of the most tortured characters in Marvel history. We could honestly do a whole list of ways Wolverine has died. Horribly. Only to be returned thanks to his healing factor. Seriously, Wolverine has even survived an atomic bomb. He has one of the most powerful healing factors ever, and is immune to all contaminants. He has superhuman senses and abilities. Superhuman everything, from sight and smell to speed and strength. Wolverine is one of the world's most skilled trackers because of this. He is also a master martial artist, a weapons expert, and an expert in assassination techniques. And here we are at number 1, Spider-Man. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man is a fan favorite, webbing up criminals and leaving them for the cops to pick up. He won't kill people, but he will sling a sewer grate or a mailbox directly at your head. The death of his Uncle Ben teaches Spider-Man that his power comes with responsibility, and he is undoubtedly one of the most powerful street-level heroes. He handles the responsibility well, going up against some serious dudes and never giving up. Spider-Man is loved by many, but the actual limits of his power are largely unexplored. It's been said that Spider-Man has to pull his punches, as his super strength would splatter goons all over the wall if he didn't ease up on them. He has an indomitable will with incredible pain tolerance. He can lift up to 10 tons, an amount that has actually increased since it was originally stated. Spidey has a gifted intellect and is a master hand-to-hand fighter, having trained with Captain America in the past. He also greatly benefits from his spider sense, alerting him to danger in a way that, combined with his agility, makes him incredibly difficult to even land a hit on. Number 10. Gambit. Also known as Remy LeBeau, he was born with burning red eyes and was kidnapped from the hospital by members of the Thieves Guild of New Orleans. Later, he's adopted by their leader. Hoping to strike an alliance with the Assassins Guild, they set Gambit up in an arranged marriage, which falls through when the bride's brother challenges him to a duel. He kills the brother and is banished from New Orleans in an attempt to maintain the alliance. He wanders the world, using his thief skills and mutant powers to charge objects with energy and get into all kinds of trouble. Gambit has a multitude of abilities, including molecular acceleration, which allows him to charge items with energy, usually playing cards. His energy and vibration-based abilities allow for accelerated regeneration and enhanced conditioning. He's not the most powerful hero, but he would definitely beat you in a game of street dice. Number 9. Moon Knight. Also known as Mark Spector, he was left for dead on a mercenary mission in Egypt, where he was spared by the moon god Khonshu, who saved him and gave him moon-based superpowers. He fights crime in the US and lives a life of multiple identities, most notably Stephen Grant, the financier, and Jake Lockley, a cab driver persona he uses to collect information. It doesn't get any more street level than that. His childhood trauma mixed in with the multiple personas causes him some serious troubles, but Moon Knight is still a powerful street level Marvel hero. He is arguably a bit higher than street level, but he still has a serious penchant for fighting crime in the streets. He is a master marksman, weapons expert, master martial artist, including former boxing champion, and much more. He's even gone toe-to-toe with the Punisher in the past, and it's been said that Moon Knight suffers from a madness so powerful it can only be described as magic.
Next on the list we got Catman. What would Batman look like if he had a feline theme? Or what would Catwoman look like if she was born a dude? Well, it might look a lot like Catman. At first glance, this might look like the weakest attempt at making a Batman clone. You literally changed one letter, but it makes sense because Catman actually started out as a villain. He had a massive white tiger named Rasputin and seemed like he wanted to beat Batman at his own game. The guy has amazing tracking skills with a keen sense of smell. He is a world-class martial artist, he's an Olympic level athlete, and he has a utility belt just like Batman. I feel like this guy might have a love-hate relationship with Batman. But then the character kind of fell off. There was an era where the writers turned him into a washed up nobody who was overweight and lost his drive to be any sort of villain. Then he bounced back and was revitalized into an anti-hero, taking out crime on his terms, and he even became a member of the mysterious group known as the Secret Six. This guy had one hell of a comeback story, and I forgot to mention that he also has razor-tipped gauntlets to simulate claws. He is really committing to the bit. I love it. Also, if this dude punches you with those things, it's an instant kill, probably.
Number 7. Colleen Wing. Also known as the Lady Samurai, Colleen was raised by her grandfather in Japan, in the mountains of northern Honshu. Her grandfather, Kenji Ozawa, lost all his other children in World War II, and trained his surviving grandchild in the arts of the samurai. Colleen lives in New York, and was once saved from death by a police officer named Misty Knight, and the two became best friends, later working as private detectives for Nightwing Restorations Inc. She was once kidnapped by Master Khan and brainwashed into killing Iron Fist, but Iron Fist later arrives and frees her from control by bridging their minds. Colleen is quite powerful, able to focus her chi to achieve exceptional strength, or enter a Zen trance, allowing her to heal faster and resist temperature extremes. She even dated Cyclops once, while Jean Grey was presumed dead. Not really sure what she saw in him, but luckily she's saved from that awful romance when Jean Grey returns. Number 6. Elektra. First appearing in Daredevil number 168 in 1981, Elektra was born on a Greek island and lost her mother when enemies of her father shot up the family's yacht. She grew close to her father but suffered from visions and heard voices. Eventually, her father puts her into therapy where she gains some stability, later training and excelling in martial arts. They come to America, where her father is a Greek ambassador to the US, and she attends Columbia University. She has a couple of exciting run-ins with Daredevil, and eventually the two fall in love and start training together. She has had a bit of a back and forth and been a little evil at times, but she's done a fair bit of crime fighting and is a very skilled assassin. She has the uncanny ability to throw her mind into the minds of others, sniffing them out, so to speak. She has demonstrated telekinetic abilities in the past, including telepathic communication. She has a mind shield as well to keep herself hidden from other telepaths. She might not have the usual super strength and durability, but she is a master of stealth, weapons, and marksmanship.
Next on the list we got Helena Wayne. There have been a few renditions of Huntress over the years, and everyone has their own favorite, but I think mine would have to be Helena Wayne. Because something I really love about comics is when you spend years building something up and give fans exactly what they want. Like in Kingdom Come, you have all the versions of Flash formed into one super Flash. That's huge fan service, and I feel the same way about Helena Wayne. She is the daughter of both Catwoman and Batman. I mean, firstly, it was about time those two lovebirds hitched up and broke the sexual tension that had been building between them for years. But on top of all of that, how do you make a more badass person than by mixing two of the best street level heroes who have ever lived? Helena Wayne of course sports the famous Huntress crossbow and rides around on a killer motorcycle.
Number 4. Hit Monkey. You heard me correctly. Hit Monkey lived in the mountains with a clan of monkeys who took in an injured assassin, and the group of monkeys nursed him back to health. Hit Monkey disagreed with this, knowing someone would eventually come to look for the assassin. He studied the assassin's ways and is eventually exiled for becoming violent with his fellow monkeys. Later, a group of soldiers does show up, and Hit Monkey is proven correct. They kill his entire clan and the assassin. Hit Monkey picks up the assassin's pistols and begins a quest for vengeance. Guided by the spirit of the deceased assassin, Hit Monkey goes on an epic crusade with a duffel bag full of guns. At one point, he disguises himself as a young boy, the ring bearer at a wedding. One of his greatest advantages is his enemies refuse to believe a monkey assassin could be real and is coming after them. He has exceptional fighting skills and has near human intellect. Definitely smarter than the average monkey. Number 3. Ghost Rider. Johnny Blaze is super hardcore and largely underrated, likely due to how over the top the character is. The son of a famous stuntman, Johnny made a deal with a demon and now has the power to control hellfire and revenge upon evildoers with his signature penance stare. Ghost Rider has been around, once working alongside Black Widow and Hercules and becoming a team known as the Champions. In human form, Johnny has no special powers really, but as Ghost Rider, he is supernaturally enhanced to a ridiculous level. Ghosty has some superhuman strength, stamina, and can regenerate near instantaneously. The Hulk once shattered his skull with a punch, and the Rider just grew a new one instantly. He can look into souls and eat the sins of degenerates, leaving them emotionless. He can identify supernatural forces around him and can manipulate hellfire in numerous ways. He wields a mystic chain capable of changing length and cutting through anything, and sometimes also wields the Hellfire shotgun. Ghost Rider has some pretty crazy, epic demon stuff going on with his storylines, but being a biker, his home is still the streets.
Next on the list we have Black Canary, the wielder of the famous Canary Cry. That is one of the most powerful superhero moves ever, able to take down some of the strongest adversaries and even destroy entire buildings. She's one of the strongest street level crime fighters around. Not every street level crime fighter is able to work their way up to being a member of the Justice League, and she comes from a line of people who want to see justice in the world. Dina's mother was the original Black Canary, and even though her mom didn't want her daughter running around trying to fight crime, because what parent wants their kid to go into a line of work that has very little pay and a high chance of them getting murdered, but she did it anyways and became one of the most famous members of the DC universe. Also, her father was a cop, so crime fighting is really in her blood. It wouldn't make sense if Dina didn't have the urge to clean up the streets. Outside of her insanely strong sonic scream, she is also a very skilled martial artist. She was trained by the famous Wildcat. And to add a little extra emotion to the relationship between her and Wildcat, he was also the one who trained Dina's mom. He loves to produce some badass crime fighting ladies.
And coming in at number 1, Squirrel Girl. First appearing in 1991, her name is Doreen Green. Her story is ridiculous and I love it. At a science demonstration, she was bitten by a radioactive squirrel. Nah, I'm just messing around. She was actually born with a modification in her genes that gave her squirrel-like abilities, including talking with squirrels. She meets a little critter named Monkey Joe who encourages her to use her abilities to help people, causing her to fantasize about being a hero and coming up with the alias the Unbeatable Squirrel Girl. Man, you really gotta be confident to put unbeatable in your name. She ambushes Iron Man one day, like not attacking him, she just shows up, hoping to impress him and become his sidekick, but Iron Man politely declines. Later, he is subdued by Dr. Doom, and Squirrel Girl comes along to rescue him, using her powers to summon a squirrel army which attacks Dr. Doom and his ship, climbing all over the ship, chewing up his wires and stuff. She is a part of the Great Lakes Avengers and has some pretty weird powers, including superhuman jaw strength that allows her to chew through steel in a matter of seconds. She has night vision, superhuman strength, healing factor, and more. She regularly breaks the fourth wall as well and is literally unbeatable, having taken on Thanos, Wolverine, and even KRAVEN the Hunter in the past.
Coming in number 10, we have Wildcat, someone who's been working behind the scenes with heroes for years. He isn't the most famous of the street level brawlers, but he has trained the likes of Black Canary, Batman, and some of the Robins, and many other heroes. He was a champion boxer who was framed for the murder of one of his friends. For a while the police were after him, but eventually he was able to sneak away and don the mask of Wildcat. Through this he was able to track down the man responsible for framing him for murder and clear his name. After this he would work with the Justice League for decades, bringing up some of the best heroes of all time.
Number 9. Blade. First appearing in The Tomb of Dracula in 1973, Eric Brooks was born in a horror movie scene. A vampire doctor feasted on his mother as she gave birth, passing on tainted enzymes that caused Eric to become a half vampire, with a whole host of vampire abilities, but none of the usual weaknesses. After his mother's death, he was raised at Madame Vanity's brothel, later meeting Jamal Afari and becoming his student, learning all there is to know about fighting and killing vampires. He fashioned himself into a vampire hunter and named himself Blade. He has sharp vampire teeth, casts no reflection, and he's an exceptional fighter, having been affiliated with many teams of heroes in the past. In his big debut, he went up against Dracula, later taking on Doppelganger and at one point joining the Night Stalkers. He has superhuman senses, strength, and speed. He's a master martial artist and weapons expert with a regenerative healing factor and immunity to the usual vulnerabilities vampires have, making him a real threat to go up against. He doesn't turn into a swarm of bats and fly around though. That would be pretty cool. Number 8. Jessica Jones. Jessica was in a car accident as a child and spent months in a coma. During the crash, her family was killed and she was exposed to radioactive chemicals. She gains powers after her coma, including strength, durability, and flight. She's been a superhero, a detective, and a vigilante. She just can't get enough of kicking the crap out of criminals. She has a storied street-level past, fighting alongside heroes like Luke Cage, Captain Marvel, and Daredevil. Jessica is a cool, grounded type of hero, but is still seriously powerful. On top of the basic stuff, she also has accelerated healing, superhuman longevity, and telepathic resistance.
Next on the list we have Richard Dragon. Back in the 1970s, martial arts were all the rage. Bruce Lee made everyone want to start kung fu fighting, as the famous song says. Well, this spread into almost every form of media, with both DC and Marvel creating the respective versions of martial arts masters. For DC, one of those characters was Richard Dragon. Richard starts off as a thief. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, but you know what? You gotta pay the bills. Well, one day he's confronted by a security guard while trying to pull off a heist, and the dude manhandles him, throws him around like a little baby. And then he has Richard on the ground before he can think twice about trying to escape. Luckily for him, the security guard saw the good in Richard and offered him to come train and learn the ways of kung fu rather than going to jail. A shot at redemption. Over the next few years, Richard would train and learn the ways of martial arts and become a master. Through this process, it would be revealed that he truly does have a heart of gold, and he only turns to using his honed martial abilities when he has no other options.
Number 6. Night Thrasher. Also known as Dwayne Taylor, this skateboarding super is definitely street. His father was a soldier, part of a military unit that discovered the Temple of Dragon's Breath, home to an evil sorceress named Ty, who has his parents killed using mind control. She clouded Dwayne's mind so that he wouldn't remember who killed his parents, and then she took him in, manipulating him into becoming a weapon against crime. Dwayne is affiliated with the New Warriors, and is definitely a powerful dude. He is an excellent gymnast, acrobat, and martial artist, as well as a skilled hacker and weapons designer. His original costume design included a bulletproof skateboard and a hidden machine gun. He has an epic battle armor suit as well, with a whole bunch of gadgets including a laser sword, napalm gel, smoke capsules, incendiary packs, and more. Number 5. The Punisher. Frank Castle first appeared in 1974 and quickly became everyone's favorite badass. An Italian-American and decorated former US Marine, you don't want to be on this guy's bad side. When his wife and children are gunned down by the mafia for witnessing a hit, he becomes a vigilante dedicated to destroying organized crime. Rich criminals may laugh at the law and bend it to their will, but they don't laugh at the Punisher. Frank Castle makes a serious vigilante, using combat experience, guerrilla warfare, and detective skills to track down and execute his targets. He's had an uneasy alliance with Spider-Man in the past, and once butted heads with Daredevil. He is in peak physical condition, a seasoned veteran in multiple forms of combat. He's an interrogation master, an expert pilot, and has an indomitable will, having even resisted telepathic control in the past. He has an incredible arsenal of weapons and equipment. I could literally do an entire video on the Punisher's various weapons and technology. Fun fact, the Punisher is actually based on a character called the Executioner, who is in a series of novels from 1969.
Next on the list we got Green Arrow, similar to Batman but way more of a playboy. Oliver Queen was a multi-billionaire who didn't care about anyone but himself. He wanted to party and rub elbows with other elites and fill every one of his sinful desires. Then one of his co-workers tried to kill him after stealing $14 million from him. That sucks. The dude threw him in the ocean, and all he managed to make it to a deserted island, and he might have died if it wasn't for his Boy Scout training. The dude knew how to survive in the wilderness and was able to find a broken down generator and use the parts to make a makeshift bow. Luckily for him, he was a skilled archer, and this would lead to him being able to hunt. The wild part of this story is that living off this island was probably the best time of his life, until he found a village that was killed by some drug smugglers. He then took out the smugglers and turned them over to the police. This was how he got his start in hero work. He would then come back to the world that he used to know and become one of the most powerful crime fighters ever, and team up with some of the best members of the Justice League, and even become a high-ranking member of the Justice League.
Number 3. The Sentry. Also known as Robert Reynolds. He was a drug addict who one day broke into a lab looking for the good stuff. He accidentally discovers the ultimate, however, remnants of the super soldier serum from the war, but the serum is now more powerful than ever. The serum causes him to sort of explode, killing his friend and completely destroying the lab. Then, in classic addict fashion, he finds the guy who was working on the serum and asks, "Can you make me some more?" Project Sentry allowed him to test his powers at their facility, but they couldn't contain his desire to use the powers for greater good. The Sentry eventually teams up with the New Avengers after Electro stages a massive jailbreak and sets about 90 supervillains free. When Carnage shows up and takes the fight to the next level, it's Sentry that grabs Carnage, flies him up into space, and rips him in half. Okay, so maybe Sentry is a little more higher than street level, but not a lot of people know when he started out, he was your typical street level guy, saving cats from trees, stopping bank heists, you name it. Number 2. She-Hulk. She-Hulk has some things in common with some others on this list. She's a lawyer like Daredevil, but was also shot by a mobster in the event that turned her into She-Hulk, sorta like Frank Castle's origin. Being a Hulk, it goes without saying that Jennifer Walters is a powerhouse of a superhero. Although she does take part in the Secret Wars in 1984 and gets involved with the Avengers, she also has worked with the Heroes for Hire and spends plenty of time on the streets fighting crime. Her Hulk form has the proportionate strength of her human body, meaning as she continues to improve her physique, her Hulk form also becomes more powerful. She benefits from superhuman everything. Durability, speed, you name it. She-Hulk also has full control over her transformations, unlike Bruce Banner, but the upper limit of her strength is not as high. She is still, however, powerful enough to effortlessly lift the Thing with one arm.
Number 1 on the list is Mr. Terrific. You can be a billionaire like Green Arrow and that's enough to be a great hero. But what if you're a billionaire and one of the smartest people who ever lived, and also one of the best athletes ever? Mr. Terrific, also known as Michael Holt, is one of the smartest men alive, understanding quantum physics at the age of 6. He's an elite level athlete, winning multiple gold medals at the Olympics. He has more money than God. Well, he decided to use his knowledge and power to become one of the strongest street level heroes with a list of gadgets to rival Batman. This dude can turn invisible. He has magnetic balls that fly around and knock people out. He can fly, create holograms, create force fields. He's incredibly skilled with ballistic weapons. He's also good at hand-to-hand combat. He's got a keen eye for danger, and did I mention he has enough money to buy bottle service until the world turns to dust? Yeah, this dude is legit.